All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Housing Inventory Count Survey Training. This webinar is designed specifically for SSVF, Rapid Rehousing, Joint TH, and Rapid Rehousing and GPD programs. If you are not one of those program types, please make sure to check the Housing Inventory Count Survey General Training for guidance on that. So a few housekeeping rules. So all lines have been muted during this presentation. If there's any questions, please submit them in the chat box. I will respond to any questions available so everyone can make sure to hear. For today, I have two main objectives. I hope that everyone will have a chance to hear the entire webinar and after understand the purpose of the housing inventory count and process. For those that are in SSVF, Rapid Rehousing, Joint TH, Rapid Rehousing, and GPD programs, hopefully you'll be able to complete the HIC survey for each of those applicable programs because you do provide services in a slightly different manner. We hope that you'll be able to complete that information for those. So on your screen, you'll see the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the HIC and the purpose. Then we'll show the 2019 process. And then we'll really dive into the different sections of the HIC survey. At the end, we'll just go through a few common mistakes that we saw in 2018 and then talk about the due date and close it out with some helpful tips and resources here at All Chicago. Now, before we begin, we'll dive a little bit into the different acronyms that you've already heard. So the housing inventory count is also nicknamed the HIC, and that is a snapshot of all our beds and units available in Chicago to house individuals experiencing homelessness. The point in time, which occurs at the same time of the HIC, is also referred to as the PIT, and it is a snapshot of the number of individuals experiencing homelessness on a given night. For 2019, that night is January 24th. So information from your HIC and your PIT will be based on that point in time. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is the larger funder here in Chicago, and we often refer to that department as HUD. All the information taken from the HIC and PIT is entered into the database that HUD provides, which is the Homeless Data Exchange System, which we nicknamed to HDX. Here locally, we have a Chicago program models chart, and this was developed by our community and really helps us define the different program model types. So it'll give you information about core values that are integral to the homeless service programming, and it outlines program descriptions as well as outcome and system outcomes. The continuum of care is shortened to the COC. It is a membership organization that is comprised of organizations, government, individuals, and others who work to prevent and end homelessness. The Rapid Rehousing, which is nicknamed RRH, is a program type in Chicago which is designed to rapidly connect families and individuals to permanent housing through a tailored package of assistance, which may include the use of time-limited financial assistance. The Supportive Services for Veteran Families, which is SSVF, provides services to veteran families living in or transitioning to permanent housing. And finally, the Grants Per Diem Program, GPD, provides supportive housing or services to veterans. So now we'll dive into what is the housing inventory count. So as many of us know, the housing inventory count is a requirement by HUD. We do conduct it on an annual basis, and HUD does instruct us to conduct this within the last 10 days in January. As I mentioned previously, the HIC is an intertwined process with the point in time count because we want to take a look at the number of individuals in a sheltered program, and also taking a look at the beds and units available on the same given night. Now, the reason we do it, besides it being a HUD requirement, is that it does contribute to the annual homeless assessment report. So this is a report that is given to Congress that provides nationwide estimates of individuals and families experiencing homelessness. So it pulls in all this demographic information from the point in time, as well as our housing inventory here. And this report is used to determine the funding for the communities nationwide. In addition, the HIC provides information that is utilized for coordinated entry. Here in Chicago, coordinated entry was rolled out in 2017, and in 2018, we have developed the Chicago Dashboard to End Homelessness, which provides weekly updates as far as individuals that are being matched to the different interventions in Chicago. So our bed and inventory list helps us gauge how these matchings are occurring to give a real life view of that information. Additionally, those that receive HUD-COC funding will know that an annual competition happens, and all this information is also included in the COC application. All Chicago and the Department of Family and Support Services provide information as to the progress that Chicago is doing as far as ending and preventing homelessness. And finally, all this information that is taken is also used to inform data decisions on local funding. So we do take a look at what our gaps are and to help us determine what services need to be funded. So now that we know a little bit why we do the HIC, we'll go over a few changes that happened from 2018 to 2019. So the first one is regarding the HMIS participation. So in previous years, HUD had 4 levels of HMIS participation. So we saw that we had the option to indicate all the beds were participating in HMIS. Some beds were, no, there was no participation because that particular project was a domestic violence, or just in general, there was no participation in HMIS because it was not a funder requirement. Now, HUD has removed the some bed participation option. Therefore, for the HIC reporting, we will split your program into 2. For example, if you had 20 beds but only 10 participated in HMIS, by this time next year, you'll see 2 different programs listed. One will have those 10 beds that participate in HMIS, while the other 10 will be assigned a different HMIS ID number, and it'll show that there is no HMIS participation. At the program level, you'll continue to operate as normal. However, we will just have you listed out differently to help with our reporting. We do ask that this year, if that is applicable to you, please make sure that you do complete a separate HIC survey for those beds that are not currently participating in HMIS. Regarding the HIC beds, as I mentioned earlier, because we take all this information and data, input that into our system in the Chicago Dashboard to End Homelessness, which is shared publicly, we heard that some of the number of funded beds and units is not 100% accurate. We know that at the point in time of last year for the HIC, the program may have been operating at a higher capacity. So for example, maybe a program was working with a landlord that provided a unit at a much more lower market rate rent, and therefore had some extra money and could provide additional services for other clients. However, that wasn't the expectation that they would continue to operate at that level. So year round, they went back to their funded number. Because this information is contributing to the coordinated entry, we want to make sure that we capture everyone's funded amount, beds and units, and also know what the total number is and be able to account for that accurately. In 2018, we did see that the Veterans Affairs did do their classification slightly different than what we've seen in previous year, and it still continues to uphold for 2019. On the screen, you'll see that those that are receiving VA funding, there has been a change in the components in GPD and also what we would classify you in the HIC. So for example, if you receive GPD funding for transition in place, you will no longer be considered a transitional housing program model type, but actually a permanent housing, an OPH. So please make sure that you are indicating the correct project type for submission. Now that we've reviewed the changes from last year, on your screen, you'll see what the process is. So the nice thing is that you're in the first step, you're attending one of the HIC trainings. We've also been doing in-person trainings with the Department of Family and Support Services. So those are for all those programs that do the point-in-time shelter account. And we also have a webinar available on the All Chicago website. So once we've completed all the trainings, we will go into the HIC submissions, and we'll go a little bit into detail about the due date for that later on in this presentation. Once we received all the HIC submissions, we'll be doing any follow-ups for any missing HIC surveys and or discrepancies that we may see in the submissions. Around March, HUD will open up the HDX system and will allow for data entry. And their due date usually falls around April. Because HUD does look into this information, we usually do see that they will have some clarifying questions for us between the months of May and June. So therefore, we do not issue out a report until the summertime, just to ensure that we're providing the final numbers to our community. So who needs to submit a housing inventory count survey? So generally it is any program that provides a housing inventory to individuals experiencing homelessness, but we'll divide it a little bit differently for the different models that we're talking about today. For rapid rehousing, so you will have to submit a HIC survey. And we want you to take a look at those individuals currently in your program that are enrolled on the night of the count, who are receiving supportive services as well. But we want you to count those that are actually in permanent housing on the night of the count. We know for those rapid rehousing programs, you may have clients that may not be in an actual unit on the night of the count. So we're going to go ahead and count those individuals in an open or vacant unit because they are not actually in their own unit on the night of the count. For the SSVF programs, you must also complete a HIC. Now there are some SSVF programs that offer both homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing assistance, and you may intermingle clients in the same program. And so if that's the case for you, you should be recording clients that are receiving homelessness prevention, and you're also indicating which clients are receiving rapid rehousing. For the purpose of the HIC, we do not want to include the clients that are receiving homelessness prevention services on the night of the count. So you must account for only those individuals that are currently enrolled in the SSVF on the night of the count, are in permanent housing on the night of the count, and do not receive the homelessness prevention services only. In 2017, we had a new program that started off as a joint TH rapid rehousing model. Now this is a new model that has been designed that takes a look at both the transitional housing and rapid rehousing model. For those programs that have this model, you will also have to submit a HIC survey. However, you will only be reporting out on those individuals that are currently enrolled in the rapid rehousing on the night of the count, and also those that are in permanent housing on the night of the count. Now, for those that are in the TH portion of the model, you will have to participate in the point-in-time shelter count. So if you have any additional questions about that, you can feel free to reach out to us and connect you with the Department of Family and Support Services to help share what that process looks like. So who needs to submit a HIC? So on your screen, you'll see all the different program types that are included in the HIC. So we account for emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, safe haven, the joint model, permanent housing, which would include permanent supportive housing, the rapid rehousing, and other PH such as housing with services that do not require a disability, and housing only. Because we do know that there are a couple of agencies that oversee a variety of different program models at their agency, we do require that a separate HIC is submitted for each applicable program. The housing inventory count does contain questions related to the point in time that is happening on January 24th. So please make sure that you are looking at the information for your clients enrolled on the night of January 24th. And finally, each HIC survey must be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, January 28th. On your screen, you'll see the different sections. So the 2019 HIC does contain 12 sections. We know that that sounds like a lot of sections, but each section has around 1 to 2 questions. If everything stayed the same from last year, you get to proceed to the next section. There will be additional questions that show up in the event that you have to provide updated information for this year. In section 1, we ask about the agency name, the primary contact, the full name, title, and also the secondary contact information. I will make a note that anyone that is listed as a primary contact, please make sure that that is the individual that would be able to respond to any HIC additional questions that all Chicago staff may have. We know in previous years we sometimes saw maybe the executive director was listed as a primary contact. However, when it comes to follow-up, we spend a lot of time trying to get in contact with the executive director and then are redirected to the secondary contact that is listed. So please make sure that you do make a note of that, as well as please provide 2 separate contacts for the primary and secondary contact. We know that sometimes, individuals move on to bigger, better things. Sometimes someone wins the lotto and leaves their agency. So we want to make sure that we do have an additional contact at your agency to share and ask any questions. And the information provided in the HIC survey also helps us to communicate the next year's HIC information. We will be asking about the site address, and I'll go into a little bit more details for that one in a little bit. We'll ask about the funding source. And a new thing that we also included is we'll be asking about the operating start date. So if everyone could just please take a note as to when this could be a guess as to when the program started to serve clients. We do want to keep track of that information in our system as well. On your screen, you'll see information as to we're asking about the address for this specific program. Now, for many of you, you will be serving tenant-based scattered site. So we do ask that you list an actual address. So it could be if you happen to work with a landlord and many of your clients are, in that landlord's building, you can indicate that address. But if you don't, because we know a lot of our agencies work with different landlords throughout the city of Chicago, so they may have one landlord with one client on the south side, another building on the west side, and one on the north side. It makes it a little bit difficult to pinpoint an address that has a majority of beds and units. If that applies to you, please make sure that you indicate your agency's administrative office. We do ask that you provide a complete address, so please make sure that you include the zip codes. If you are a domestic violence agency, we do not want that information, so that address will be kept confidential. So for our community, we do have different funding sources that support the different programs that we're addressing today. For the most part, our SSVF and GPD, is funded through the Veterans Affairs. So please make sure that you indicate the appropriate funding source for that. If you receive other funding sources for your program, please make sure that you apply. It doesn't just have to be one funding source. We know many of our programs do grading funding, so just make sure that you indicate those as well. Our rapid rehousing programs, we do have a funding source. Many are supported through the ESG funding, so please make sure that you indicate that. And we also have some rapid rehousing programs that are funded through the COC. Now, similar to previous years, we do have information that'll pre-populate from 2018 into the HIC survey. We've allowed this kind of option so that way individuals don't have to, go back and try to find their submission report that they did in 2018, or maybe, another individual, that was their responsibility and you're not quite sure where that report is and so forth. So what we've done is we've included this login option. So you'll have to log in, you'll have to provide a username and password. And your username will be the project name that we have on file, and the password will be the HMIS ID number that is assigned. In order to do that and to see that, I know that may not be some information that you know off the top of your head. As you can see on your screen, we do have a hyperlink in the HIC survey where you'll click it and you'll be able to see all the agencies and projects that submitted in 2018. So on your screen, that is what it looks like, and you'll also see that we've provided the link to the Google Doc that contains all this information. In 2018, we had 285 different programs report out on the HIC. So as you can see, an agency may have multiple programs, for example, as a safe haven is listed here. And they're all kind of slightly worded differently. So for a safe haven rapid rehousing expansion program, that would be the username and the password would be 1375. I do share that the login option is very case sensitive. So if you do see that your project has a really long name, such as a little bit of heaven-ESRN overnight program, what I usually do is I just copy that and then I paste it into the username box of Survey Gizmo, and then I just type in my password of 133. If you are having some difficulties, you can always feel free to reach out to the COC team and we'll be more than happy to assist you with this. In the event that we did not capture your program in 2018, maybe you just started a new program and you don't see that program listed on the 2018 HIC submission chart, we do have the option to start a new one. So we have created usernames and login dummy access just to allow you to proceed. Now you will have to update all the information because all the information that is currently on there is just listed as please update. So please make sure to take some time to review the questions and update that as you go through that section. All right, section 2 is regarding the Chicago model type and the HUD type. Because here locally, we do have some models that are very unique to Chicago, for example, interim housing. If we were to go to HUD and say we have 10 interim housing programs, they would not know what type of model that is for them. So we've made it a point to include what is the program model here locally, what do we know you as, and also what are we classifying you for submission to HUD. So please take a moment to look at that information. If all that information is accurate, please make sure that you say, yes, my information is okay, and then you will proceed to the next section. If for some reason some of that information is incorrect, you will say no, and additional questions will pop up. On your screen, you'll see the different definitions that we have. So for all the programs, for most of the programs here on the webinar will be classified as rapid rehousing. So our SSVF programs, we will be classifying you as a rapid rehousing. If you are a GPD program, depending on the type of funding, as we saw in a slide previously, You may be on other permanent housing or transitional housing. And obviously our rapid rehousing would be the rapid rehousing option. Section 3 is regarding your target population. So again, you will see information that was provided in 2018. If that information has not changed since then, you will have the option to say, yes, my information is still accurate, and you'll proceed to the next question. The nice thing about the target population is that it is not mandatory. We do know that there are some programs that have designed their program that they only serve single males or single females, and they would not serve another population. But many of our programs do not have a specific target population, so you will have the option to select NA. Section 4 is regarding your HIC beds. So this is a section where we have divided out what is the total number of funded beds available at your program. And this is a number that you would indicate to your funding source. So if you let us know maybe in 2018 you had a total of 40 beds, but in reality you're only required to report out to, let's say, your rapid rehousing ESG that you only have 30 beds. So you would indicate here the 30, and then you would indicate the 10 as an overcapacity bed. So that way we can take the funded plus the overcapacity to equal the total number of bed. Your total number of bed has to be the actual beds available at your program, so please make sure that you do account for that. You may have to adjust some of this information because in 2018, we just took all the information on the total beds. So we indicated those numbers would be your funded beds, but I know that's not 100% accurate. So please make sure to review this section and account for that. So as I mentioned earlier, what is the difference between a funded and an overcapacity bed? So all of this inventory, sorry about that, is being inputted into the HMIS system. So this information will attribute to the coordinated entry and also be shared to be displayed on the Chicago dashboard to end homelessness. So right now, if you were to take a look at our dashboard, you'd be able to see that we have 783 available units, but only 353 individuals have been matched. Now, this can account for a variety of things. Many of those units may not be participating in a coordinated entry, but we also know that some information is because we're attributing that total number of beds, but programs are really keeping that funded number into account because there was just a special circumstance that happened in January of 2018. So if you're not sure what the funded bed is, please make sure to check in with the appropriate department at your agency. That way you're ensuring that you are reporting out accurately. Section 5 is only for emergency shelters, so you will not be shown that section. So more than likely you will just go into section number 6. Section number 6 is taking a look at the increases from last year's HIC until now. So in the event that you receive some new funding, perhaps DFSS awarded you additional funding and you were able to increase the number of clients served. So please make sure that you indicate that. Additionally, if you were awarded additional funds, but they just haven't come through, but your program is anticipating that funding to come maybe in March or April, so that your capacity will be increasing. Please make sure to indicate that as well. Come this time in January 2020, I will be following up with those programs just to ensure that everything went smoothly and that funding did come through. Section 7 is regarding your bed occupancy. So I'll be asking you based on January 24th, what was the occupancy at your project? And you'll have to indicate, how many beds were occupied by the different household types. We capture 3 different household types. We capture households without children, which would be your single adults, households with one adult and one child. And what we're talking about for these families and only for the HIC reporting is these would be an adult and a child under the age of 18. And for households with only children, this would be unaccompanied children under the age of 18. So for example, if you have a 17-year-old enrolled in your program. Because we do know that there are being cribs where, families have a small infant. Please make sure that you're only counting that crib in the crib section. And for my rapid rehousing programs and SSVF and GPD, we do know that sometimes you do have small children, maybe doubled up to one bed. Please make sure that you count that as one bed for our reporting. Now, for those counted in an occupied bed, please make sure that you're only counting those clients that are in a permanent housing at the time of the HIC. Please don't count those individuals that you're currently working. I know many of you may be working with a client, trying to find them a unit, and they just haven't moved just yet. Maybe they plan on moving in on January 28th or maybe at the beginning of February. Please do not count those as being an occupied bed. You would count those as an open bed. This just helps us for reporting out. We know that you're still working with that client, but we just want to make sure that we're accounting for only those clients that are in a permanent housing at the time of the HIC. On your screen, you'll see a screenshot of what it looks like in Survey Gizmo. So again, you'll be indicating the 3 different household types, and we're asking you to just sum up at the bottom for those different columns. You'll see a question in there that asked about the total number of people in your program. So you'll see that for our emergency shelters, transitional housing, interim housing, permanent housing with short-term supports, youth transitional housing programs, safe havens, and so forth, that there's a note that it must match the DFSS point-in-time tally sheets. Because most of you will not be participating in that, please make sure that the total number of people here matches the total number of people in an occupied bed. So for the vacant beds, we're going to ask you how many beds were available for a person. So these are individuals that you also may be working, that you're in the process of finding a unit or a bed for them. If you didn't have any vacancy, so let's say all your clients are in a unit on the night of the count, you would indicate that you were at full capacity. If you were not at full capacity and you're not sure, maybe all your clients were in a permanent housing on the night of the count, but you had a couple of new openings, you weren't sure if those beds would be for a single or a family. Just because you haven't been matched with an individual, you can just indicate the number of open vacancies that you have and what type of combination that would have been, or if it was for one of those specific household types. What we do on the back end here at All Chicago, we would just make an extrapolation calculation based on those that are occupied as to what that bed would have been for. Section 8 is regarding your HMIS participation. So you will have 3 options to choose from. So you will indicate either all your beds are participating, no, it's a DV program, or this program does not participate. Because we did remove some of the beds participating in HMIS, you will see that the number of beds is your total bed count. So if that's the case, that maybe you had some beds that are not participating in HMIS, now please make sure that you submit a separate HIC for that one, and that you account for how many of those beds are not participating in the HMIS system. Section 9 is regarding your dedicated beds. So for the purpose of the HIC, we will be only capturing 3 types. We'll be capturing chronic homeless dedicated beds, veteran beds, and youth beds. Chronic homeless beds are only captured for permanent supportive housing. So even though you may have individuals that are experience chronic homelessness, we will not be counting those for you because this webinar is designed for non-PSH programs. If you receive SSVF or GPD, please make sure that you indicate the veteran beds on here. We did see a couple of programs last year that indicated none of their beds are dedicated to veterans. However, your funding source may have dictated, especially coming from the VA, that you serve all your clients of veteran status. A quick note about dedicated beds is that it is a much higher standard than just prioritizing. So dedicated beds, you will have specific grant language in your contracts with your funder that you are setting aside those beds for that specific population. For chronic homelessness, this really means that programs are documenting the chronic homeless status to ensure that they are able to provide that documentation to their funder. Right. Section 10 is regarding your HIC unit. So similar to the beds, we'll be asking what is the funded number of units, what's your overcapacity units, and what's the total number of units. If all the information listed is correct, please make sure that you indicate that. And if not, make sure that you're updating that information. If you're unsure, please make sure that you touch base with the appropriate department at your agency so you're reporting out accurately. Now, I always make it a point in all my presentations to include a slide as to what's the difference between a bed and what's the difference between a unit. I think for most of the programs here on this webinar, because all your programs are designed that a family or an individual will have their own private unit, so this could be their own apartment, we would count that as one unit. So we're not looking at you counting all the different bedrooms in that unit for a family or so forth. So if you're working with the family and they're all in one apartment, you would just consider that as one unit. For your unit occupancy, you will be looking similar to the bed occupancy, how many units were occupied based on the different household types. And again, it's for those that are currently in their own unit on the night of the count. Those that are currently awaiting to move into their own unit, or perhaps you're still helping them look for an apartment, please make sure that you count those as vacant. Similar to the bed, if you are not at full capacity, you'll get some additional questions, and we'll just ask you, that unit, if it would have been for a household without children or a household with children or only children. And when we talk about only children, these are unaccompanied children under the age of 18. We know that sometimes in past years, we've seen agencies, maybe list out mom and dad in households with children, and then the children will be in the households with only children. Please don't do that if it's a family in tech. Make sure that you keep those numbers together in the household with one adult and one child. Section 12 is a new section, and it is just informational. In 2018, we started seeing a very unique partnership where projects were partnering up with another agency. So one agency perhaps provided the units while the other one provided the case management. But both these two agencies are providing services to the same client. What we started seeing is that these programs were both submitting a HIC. So on our end, we started thinking that, yay, we were having an increase in units and beds to meet the needs. However, we later found out that that was not the case, and it was actually a duplication. So we asked that if this unique partnership applies to you, please make sure to reach out to that agency to ensure that only one HIC survey is being submitted. Maybe one will submit on the behalf of the other. Either way, we've kind of incorporated these questions to make sure that we are doing a cross-check in order to avoid any duplication. There is also a question in there if there's any specific information that would be helpful for the All Chicago staff. Perhaps there's a unique situation that happened that you would like to let us know. Feel free to utilize this section to help give that information. If none of this applies to you and everything in the survey is very straightforward, you know, these are optional questions, so you can just make sure to leave them blank and then proceed to review your HIC responses and then hit submit. Once you've hit submit, you get a thank you page and an email confirmation will be sent to the primary contact. So similar, you know, it only goes out to that primary contact individual. In the event that you indicated that it was someone else that is not completing the HIC survey, just make sure you touch base with that individual because they will receive that confirmation email and it will include a PDF of your submission. Survey Gizmo for me, if I get any emails from Survey Gizmo, they automatically go into my junk folder. So just make sure that you're looking at your junk spam folder before giving us a call. In the event that you have not received it, you know, the All Chicago staff will be more than happy to help give you and send you an email confirmation and a copy of your submission. All right, so now that we've gone through all the different sections, you know, we'll take a chance to just review a few common mistakes that we saw in 2018. So here we saw a program submitted that they had a total of 19 beds, but when they got to the occupancy section, they indicated they had 19 beds occupied and 2 were open. And then they brought down the 19 and the 2. As you can see, this number equals out to 21 and this equals out to 19. So I'm not sure if you overcounted or maybe you meant to update the total number of beds to 21. So this would prompt a follow-up call from the All Chicago staff just to ensure that we have the correct number. So another mistake that we saw and that we heard from providers is that they had a total number of units. They indicated the number was 15, but then, you know, similarly, they completed 15 were for single and 2 were open, and then they brought down the 15 and the 2. So similar to the first example, you know, that equals out to 17. But additionally, if you leave any blank areas such as this, Survey Gizmo will read that as an error and will not allow you to proceed to the next section. So just make sure if you have 0, you know, you type in that number 0, so that way you're able to proceed to the next section. All right, here we have a provider that indicated that their funding source was SSVF, Supportive Services for Veteran Families. However, when we got to the dedicated section, we see that they're indicating no, they have no veteran dedicated beds. So more than likely your VA funding, if you know the funding source says Supportive Services for Veteran Families, more than likely you're aiming to set aside those beds for veterans. So just make sure that your dedicated beds are matching your funding source so that we can capture those appropriately. If you are a youth program, you know, you indicated that you're a youth TH program, but then you indicated that there are no youth beds, you know, similar to the example before. Just make sure that you're indicating that, you know, if you're calling yourself a youth transitional housing, more than likely your program is set up to serve young people. All right, here we have a rapid rehousing program. But we have that when they got to their occupancy, they had 2 small children doubled up to 1 bed. For all my programs that are rapid rehousing, SSVF, GPD, please account all children to 1 bed and are not doubled up. All right, we got a couple of phone calls last year from providers that were saying that they weren't able to proceed to the next section. They didn't know what was wrong. Survey Gizmo, unfortunately, does not allow us to change the font sizes on errors and things of that nature. So sometimes you'll see in a small, like pinkish bar, and you'll see a little red line that'll show that there's an error on your page. And next to the question that has it, it'll indicate what the issue is. So I know it's easily overlooked. I know I've done it a couple of times. So just make sure that you're keeping an eye out for that little pinkish reddish bar. We have incorporated the option to save and return later, so you can, you know, let's say you haven't had a chance to check in with, some personnel at your agency about the different funding sources. So you wanted to get as far as you could and then just come back and answer that question. So there's going to be a gray bar at the top of the page. As you can see, it's a much smaller print than the actual survey that we have. So once you click on that bar, you will see a pop-up window that'll show and ask you for information about the email address. So once you've provided that email address, a unique link will be sent to just that email address. Usually I recommend for anyone that uses this option, make sure that you do receive that email from Survey Gizmo. Again, check your junk or spam folder to make sure it didn't go through there. The reason why I say this, if you exit out of the Survey Gizmo and you did not receive that unique link, here the staff at All Chicago unfortunately are not able to resend that unique link, so you will have to restart the survey. All right, so again, the due date, we are asking a separate HIC for each applicable program at your agency. We are doing all our surveys via our online platform called Survey Gizmo. We are not accepting any PDFs. If you are having some issues with Survey Gizmo, please give us a call as soon as possible to help us know what the issue is and how we can work around it. Because each year, if I were to provide the link ahead of time before the actual point in time, I will always have one or two providers that send their HIC surveys ahead of time. But because the information is related to the night of the count on January 24th, unfortunately, I do call those individuals and say, I'm sorry, you have to resubmit based on information on January 24th. So for that reason, starting on the morning of January 24th, I will be sending out a survey link. If you did not receive the email communication about this webinar, feel free to reach out to us and let us know what your email address is, so that way you can receive that that email notification come January 24th. And finally, all the HIC surveys must be in no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, January 28th. So a couple of helpful hints. Please make sure to review all the questions. We do have a link on our website for the HIC PDF. I will share that it is pretty lengthy, and that is because it shows all the possible questions you can possibly answer. As you heard through today's webinars, not all those questions will show to you. It depends on whether you have to do some updates or your program model type. I do encourage you to have all your information available before you actually go into Survey Gizmo. It just makes things much more easier. Make sure you're answering those PIC questions appropriately. And you have the opportunity to save and return later. So just make sure that if you do need to do that, you're utilizing that option. And of course, here at All Chicago, our team continues to grow. So I am working with 2 new staff members. So I have Julie and Max on the team, and they'll be available to answer any questions that you may have regarding the HIC. All right, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the All Chicago website. We'll also have the other general HIC training available as well, and also the HIC PDF. All right, are there any questions? Great. So who to contact? So on your screen, you'll see Max's contact. You can reach him at cocprograms@allchicago.org, and his phone number is listed. For any questions related to HMIS, maybe you have an emergency shelter or transitional housing program that is participating in the PIT sheltered count, and you're wondering what shelter points contact is or what role they're. So feel free to let us know. Feel free to check that out and just check out those resources. So again, there are questions in the HIC related to the point in time count, so just make sure that you're answering that appropriately. And every HIC submission must be in by Monday, January 28th, no later than 5 p.m. All right, so thank you for listening to this webinar. Please take a minute to complete the feedback survey. On your screen, you'll see the hyperlink for that. Here at All Chicago, we are continuously looking to see how we can improve our webinars and trainings to ensure that you receive the information in a concise manner. So please take a few minutes to complete the feedback survey. We do review it and take any feedback given and incorporate it for the next year. Thank you, and have a great day. We ended early. Perfect.
Sorry.